So I finally know how my bagel needs to be made. Toast it in the toaster. Put the cream cheese, then run it through that toaster thing one more time. There's only one person here who will do it for me. Her name is Kaylin. She's amazing. Finally, the perfect bagel.
Yes.
So I'm about to meet up with a Kung Fu buddy of mine. Today, by the way, is Friday, November 3rd, 2017. And we're going to meet in the River Pub, which is a really nice restaurant in Fair Lawn, New Jersey. Purpose of our meeting, his name is, I think, Josh. I forgot his fucking name. We're friends more by Facebook than anything else. But in either event, the reason why we're meeting is because he's an atheist, and I like picking people's brains. I like hearing different perspectives. I like hearing people's arguments for why they believe what they believe, because I believe that it makes me smarter, and it's important to be open-minded. And it also strengthens my faith, I believe. It also strengthens my faith, I believe, in the sense that sorry, but I had to change directions based on my GPS. Strengthens my faith in the sense that I'm able to address questions that I never want to be put in a position where someone says, oh yeah, well, if you believe what you believe, how about this? And then me not be able to answer it, at least for myself. So, you know, so far, to be frank with you, I've been able to answer every single question, with the exception of one question, when it comes to God and Christianity. You know, that one question that I haven't been able to answer, and that, you know, I do have answers for, I just don't know if I fully accept it. The question revolves around the silence of God, the hiddenness of God. You know, there's plenty of reason to believe that God exists. But the thing that always confounds me is why he's so silent, why he's so hidden, why, you know, I can't email him, why I can't call him, why there isn't, like, at least a sign in the sky that perpetually says, made by God, made in heaven, or something, you know, something to, you know, but the argument goes, the rebuttal, if you will, goes that such a sign does exist, and that sign is creation itself. You know, the complexity of creation, the fact that there is a need for an uncaused cause to explain our existence, the need for a beginner, because the universe itself had a beginning. You know, all of these things in and of themselves are the signs in the sky that I gotta cut this guy off. Are the signs in the sky that God is here and that He made it. That's one example of the rebuttal. I won't go into it now because it's too lengthy of a message and I'm driving, but someday I will. Anyway, so that's what I'm heading right now, to meet with this guy Josh, so I could pick his brain and you know, continue to intellectually. Right, here's the River Palm Terrace, meeting with my Kung Fu buddy, so that we can talk theology. He's a good guy. I'm sure it'll be a good conversation. This is a nice place too. Ugh. This thing just started recording. Can you see that shit? This is what I don't like about the GoPro.
It's God's GoPro.
It's God! He's talking to us! God is talking to us right now. God, what do you want to say to us? Cheesecake or chocolate?
I hear God is talking to me. He says that his battery is dying. He needs to get recharged.
This is a good person, a good friend that I enjoy conversation with. And I hope will not be the last time. Because this is...
Oh, no.
I do not get...
Well, I guess this is as good of a time as any to share with you my use of logic for believing in God. As soon as I figure out how to get home, I have to do a U-turn up ahead. Alright, so the concept or why I guess I listen, the truth is I struggle with my belief in God. That might surprise you kids because, you know, I've always been involved in church. I've been a leader in many ministries in church. You know, I do a lot of things related with the faith and church, etc. But I think it's perfectly fine to have doubts and questions. I think it's what makes us human, to have doubts and questions. It's when we choose not to face these doubts and questions that there becomes a problem. You know, I don't believe in blind faith. I don't believe in faith based on ignorance. You know, my faith, whatever it may be, will always be based on my looking over my reasons for believing and the counter arguments as well. With that said, I believe that my main reasons for believing in a God is because we know scientifically that there is a beginning to this universe. Based on Big Bang cosmology, there was a beginning of the universe back to a finite point in time before which nothing existed. None of the physical, material, energy, or anything that we presently know as this universe existed before this finite time in the universe. Also again known as Big Bang cosmology. So we know therefore that the universe came into existence at some point in time. So we must now ask the question, what is the cause of this universe coming into existence? And there are only certain possibilities for that answer. Possibility number one, the universe always existed. Well, the problem with that is that scientifically we know that this is not the case. The universe, based on science, has not always existed. I believe it's because of the red shift, it's called. Radiation spread throughout the universe. This is how scientifically we know that the universe has not always been here. So we can eliminate that. Option two, the inflationary hypothesis, which is the concept that the universe began, expanded, and then contracted back into a finite point, and then expanded again, and then contracted again, and expanded again, and contracted again. But again, just like with the concept of an infinite universe, there is no scientific evidence to suggest that we have a contractionary universe, or also known as the inflationary universe. Why? Because there is no disbursement of radiation in such a way to suggest that the universe existed before its current state of existence. So we can eliminate that. Number three, the universe created itself. Well, we don't need science for that. It's simply absurd to believe that anything that did not exist could somehow create itself out of nothingness. There is no thing there, and no thing cannot somehow create itself if there is nothing there to do the creating. So we can eliminate the idea that the universe somehow created itself. Possibility number 4 or 5, I'm losing track here. Stephen Hawking, I believe he's a evolutionary biologist and atheist, once posited the idea that the universe exists simply because there are laws. So for example, because the law of gravity exists, therefore the universe, by its inherent nature, would come into existence because there are laws. In my opinion, that is simply absurd, for the same reason why it's ridiculous to posit that the universe simply created itself out of nothing. Just because laws exist does not necessitate that something must be created from it. Just because the law of gravity exists does not necessitate that something must absolutely fall because gravity exists. Hence, I personally do not agree with any conclusion that the universe exists simply because there are laws. There are books and academic writings that better explain this argument than I am presently doing. And I would encourage you to look that up, because I don't know that I'm exactly expressing myself as clearly as I would like to on that point. Moving on though, another possible explanation for the existence of the universe is that our universe is one of an infinite number of universes. Well, the problem with that concept is, number one, that falls under the category of theoretical physics. Because it is theoretical in nature, it is simply a theory, meaning that there is no direct evidence to prove or demonstrate that there are any other universes outside of our own, much less an infinite number of universes. So if I am to accept the multiverse theory or the infinite number of universes theory, I must do so on faith. And that puts me in the same league as folks who accept the creation of the universe as being based on a God based on faith. So I eliminate that if I'm going to be an atheist and reject the concept of the Christian God based on faith. Furthermore, there is no observable evidence at all presently, not even indirect evidence, to suggest that there are multiple universes out there. And if there were an infinite number of universes, then we have the problem of, well, what is responsible for the creation of these infinite number of universes? What is the mechanism responsible for that? And all we would have done is taken the question one step back, and we must then explain, where did that mechanism come from? It requires a cause, unless we consider it to be an uncaused cause, which would then again place it in the league of faith, and we would have to therefore also accept the Christian understanding of creation based on faith as a possibility as well. So the atheist, in order to accept multiverse theory, must also be willing to accept the theistic view of creation, meaning that there is a God responsible for the creation of the universe. Since the possibility, if the possibility exists for one, the possibility faith must also exist for the other. Finally, there remains one last possible solution, and that is that the universe has what is called an uncaused cause. What does that mean? It means that if there is a beginning to the universe, which scientifically we know to be the case, then there must be a beginner of the universe. Something that is beyond space and time, beyond this universe, something that is not subject to time, space, matter, or any physical component, something powerful or more powerful and great in its power, so much so that it is able to create the universe that we see. And it is also something that must be personal, meaning that it has the ability to make decisions, to decide, poof, the universe begins. Oddly enough, this uncaused cause does not require a creator itself, because it is uncaused. It is something that exists for infinity. It doesn't have a beginning and it doesn't have an end. And as I was starting to say, oddly enough, that sounds like God, at least the theistic understanding of God. So, in conclusion, based on the only options that I currently understand as possibilities for the existence of this universe, the only plausible explanation that seems to make sense, at least in line with what we understand about science, is that our universe exists because there is an uncaused cause that is immense in power, is able to make the intelligent decision to do something, meaning to create, is not subject to time, space, or matter, and is therefore infinite, and is responsible for the creation of all that we see. Now, does that thing necessarily have to be God as we understand it in the Bible? Maybe not. That could be argued as a different counterpoint. However, it is strangely odd that the theistic Christian and Judaic and even Muslim understanding of God falls directly in line with our understanding of this uncaused cause. Personal, intelligent, immense in power, great in intelligence, and personal with the ability to decide to create. Couldn't I argue that the uncaused cause is also a possibility for the mechanism that creates an infinite number of universes? The answer to that is yes. Feasibly, I could use the same argument of an uncaused cause to explain why there is an infinite number of universes. However, there are two challenges. Challenge number one is Occam's razor, which I encourage you to Google, although I will briefly address it here. And challenge number two is the argument from complexity. Number one, what is Occam's razor? Occam's razor is a philosophical argument which states that when having to choose between two options, always choose the option that is the simplest, as that which is the simplest is most often the best or correct answer. Therefore, what Occam argues is that it is easier to conclude that the universe is a result of one uncaused cause than it is of an infinite number of universes, whereas each universe would have to be complex in its own infinite number of ways. Therefore, the complexity of an infinite number of universes is much greater than the simplicity of arguing for one uncaused cause instead of arguing for an infinite number of complex universes. So that's number one, Occam's razor. Number two, the argument from complexity. If we look at the universe that we exist in today, there is so much fine-tuning in the universe that it seems unlikely and highly improbable that the universe exists purely by chance. When we think about all of the things that are necessary for the existence of this universe and intelligent, sentient beings as we have on planet Earth to exist, those rules are so numerous that it is a miracle that we exist. Therefore, the complexity of life itself suggests that there is something greater than a mechanism that is simply spitting out a number of infinite universes, just like a random machine without any personal direction or decision to do so. Instead, it suggests that there is some form of a purposeful being, whether or not that being is God, but there is some purposeful being that is responsible for creating, at the very least, this one observable universe with all of the complexities that it has. It doesn't seem likely that there would be some random mechanism randomly generating an infinite number of universes and by chance creating this one universe with all of the necessary finely tuned necessities of life that we observe in the universe today. Hence the conclusion that a single uncaused cause of this singular observable universe is more than likely the case, and sounds very much like the God that we are very familiar with.
Since I'm on the topic of speaking about God,
I will also give what are some of my answers to the question of why does God not speak to us? Why does he seem to hide himself from us? Why does he not show himself in his immense power and glory? Why does he not have a stamp across the sky visible by all in which it says made by God in the sky somehow? Why can't I email him? Why can't I call him? One of the answers that I believe exists, and I'm not saying I fully accept, I struggle with it, but I think at least opens the possibility and probability of an answer, is that according to the Bible, we exist for two reasons. One is relationship with God. God desired to relate to his creation, so he created us for relationship. Number two is that our purpose in being created is so that we may be a reflection of God, so that we may glorify God. To better understand this last point, we must remember that God is spirit. God is not a physical being. God is not this entity made of matter. He is something unseen. He is, again, spirit that you can't see, you can't hear, you can't feel. Therefore, the argument goes that we, as material beings, were created so that God can be expressed through us. So, when we unconditionally love our children, for example, that is us expressing the characteristic of love that is inherent in God. When we are merciful towards someone else, that is us expressing the characteristic of mercy that is an inherent part of the Spirit of God. When we sin, because then the atheist would say, oh, well, if that's the case, then how come we're able to do evil? Does that mean that God can do evil? No. The existence of sin or the existence of evil is demonstrative of the existence of free will. Free will is a characteristic of the Spirit of God, meaning that God has the free will and the ability to decide to do good, to do bad, etc. What else was I going to say? Also, the purpose of sin and evil is for the purpose and function of demonstrating another characteristic of God, which is his mercy, his grace, and also his love. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that the sins of all of the world may be forgiven. Hence, sin and evil fall under a specific purpose, which is demonstrating God's characteristic of love, mercy, and justice, which he satisfies by providing himself as the ultimate sacrifice for the forgiveness of all sins. So in conclusion, what I'm stating is that perhaps God does not hide himself, but rather makes himself heard through us, through our actions. This is why reading the Bible is so important, because in reading his word, we come closer in better understanding and communicating with his Spirit, which he put down for us through eyewitness testimony of prophets and people who physically experience the presence of God here on earth. So the Bible is a written guide map, if you will, of how to experience God within ourselves. In fact, the Bible tells us that our human bodies, ourselves, are the temples of the Holy Spirit, meaning that God dwells within us. So maybe that is why we allegedly do not hear God speak. Because if we are his temples, if we are the voice, if we are the instrument, the musical instrument that is supposed to play the musical notes, if we don't read those musical notes, i.e. the Bible, if we do not enter into a relationship with the orchestra guide, the maestro, meaning God, and we therefore do not play a tune, how can we, the instrument, therefore expect to hear the music that God intends for us to play? Interesting. I leave you with that thought as I continue to chew on it myself.